This is a cuda. It's an armored vehicle based on the 70 series Toyota Land Cruiser, and it can handle just about anything. The cuda has some amazing quirks and features, as you probably could have guessed, if security and protection is very important to you. And today, I'm going to review the cuda and show you everything. I've borrowed the cuda from Alpine Armoring, which is an armored vehicle manufacturer located here in the Washington, D.C. area. This insane Toyota Land Cruiser sits in their showroom. It was hit with over 350 rounds of ammunition, and a bomb was detonated under it to prove its incredible security capabilities. But Alpine Armoring also manufactures purpose-built armored vehicles like the cuda, which is even more intense. You can check out Alpine Armoring by clicking the link in the description below to head over to their website or their Instagram, where they have some very interesting vehicles. So let's talk cuda. Like I said, this is based on the 70 series Toyota Land Cruiser, which has been in production in the same basic form since the 1980s. It's also well known and well loved for its reliability and durability. The 70 series is also one of the most versatile vehicles on the planet. It's an SUV or a pickup truck or an ambulance. It's also used as an ice expedition vehicle or an underground mines. But this might just be the most insane 70 series yet. This truck has a 4.5 liter diesel V8 that's mated to a manual transmission and four-wheel drive, but of course it has a lot more than that too. It seats 8, it has a public address system and sirens and lights and all sorts of cool armoring stuff, which I will show you. So today I'm going to review the cuda and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the cuda by first discussing exactly what this is. I mentioned earlier this is based on the 70 series Toyota Land Cruiser, except Alpine Armoring takes the Land Cruiser body and gets rid of it, and they have their own fully armored body that they drop on top instead. Now, if you're a fan of the 70 series Land Cruiser, you can kind of tell that this is a 70 series underneath. It has the same basic general proportions, the same sort of narrow width, obviously the same wheelbase, but pretty much everything else has been replaced and everything has been armored. This vehicle is fully armored. The hood, the sides, the roof, it's all armored. And I'm going to show you some of the quirkier and interesting armored pieces on this truck. One interesting piece of armoring here is the grille. A combustion engine needs air in order to work properly, but having air gaps is sort of directly at odds with the point of armoring a vehicle. So, in this case, there are louvers in the grille that face downwards. That way, air can still get in the downward-facing louvers, but no one can penetrate this grille with fire unless they're firing from like down here below you, which is a pretty unlikely thing for any situation this vehicle might encounter. So, still armored and yet still gets air through thanks to these angled louvers. And then there's the glass. The cuda has 10 windows, front, rear, sides, 10 total windows, and each of them are armored with glass that is over 40 millimeters thick. That's 1.5 inches thick in each piece of glass to make sure none of it can be penetrated with live fire. That is pretty amazing. And if you look outside at the glass, you can get an idea of just how thick each window is because they're all covered in this like protective casing that kind of shows their thickness. That's even true of the windshield. You can see it's surrounded in this protective casing. You can see just how thick it is. And of course, all this thickness adds a lot of weight. A normal car windshield weighs maybe 25 pounds. The windshield in this vehicle weighs about 150 pounds because it has so much thickness for armoring to make sure nothing can penetrate the window. And just in case you want to see how thick this glass is, here you go. This is a sample of the thickness of this armored glass. You get an idea, nothing is getting through here. That's pretty cool. But back to the weight for a second. I mentioned the windshield is incredibly heavy, but that's not the only heavy thing. I wish you could feel the doors doors in this vehicle. Unbelievably heavy doors, very, very different from the standard 70 series door because of the armoring on the door itself and of course the massively heavy glass as well. And that's true of every panel in this vehicle. The hood is also unbelievably heavy to open and close. That's just sort of life with an armored vehicle. And by the way, speaking of the doors, this is an interesting aspect of an armored vehicle because the doors have to open. And so by definition, there has to be a gap between the door and the body of the car. So how do you armor this? I've always assumed you can just walk up to an armored vehicle, and if you stick your gun right in the seam between the door and the body, you should be able to fire into the car. But Alpine Armoring has, of course, thought of that. If you open up the door, you can see there's actually armoring behind the door seam. You can see it there. And then, of course, the edge of the door is also armored, just like the entire rest of the door. The interesting trick here is that the gap when the door closes is actually offset. The door closes sort of on top of the additional armoring on the other side of the door seam, and so there's no real gap in the armoring. Unlike a normal car where the door just closes and there's a little gap with the body, here they actually kind of overlap to make sure every single surface is armored, even the seam behind the door opening, so you're protected no matter where fire is coming from. And the cool armored stuff doesn't end there. The door seam thing is pretty neat, but probably my favorite armored piece on this vehicle is the fuel tank. Look underneath right back here and you can see, yes, even the fuel tank is armored, so this thing isn't going to blow up and so nobody can pierce your fuel tank in case you need to make a getaway while there's an ambush, which is pretty neat. And just in case you're curious exactly how much this armoring can protect you, Alpine Armoring tells me that the Cuda is armored up to a level A9B6, which of course has no meaning to me, but what they explained is that it can take fire from an AR-15 or an AK-47 and none of that stuff will penetrate the cabin. And you can even detonate grenades underneath this vehicle and it will protect the occupants so you don't have to worry about injury in a grenade explosion, which is pretty insane. Now, it's worth noting if that happens, the vehicle might not still run and drive like normal or even at all, because you can't really armor a drive shaft very easily. It's possible, but this vehicle doesn't have it, but it will keep people safe in the occupant compartment so they can be rescued later, and that's pretty impressive. And the armoring goes beyond just the body and the windows of the Cuda. This truck also has specially designed run-flat tires that have sort of a composite material between the tire and the wheel, which can act as a sort of tire in case your tire is punctured. Alpine Armoring told me that these specially designed run-flat tires can take this truck at up to 50 miles an hour for up to 50 minutes after they've been punctured. And crucially, I'm not talking about a puncture like, oh, you got a nail in the tire. I mean, if the tires have been shot out with ammunition, this truck can still go 50 miles an hour for 50 minutes in order to get away, which is obviously a pretty crazy thing. And then, of course, there's the front bumper. You got an armored vehicle with armored windows and armored tires. You gotta have one of these bumpers, this like push-style ram bumper that can run into everything and get it out of the way. You can see it's absolutely massive, and it too is armored and reinforced so it can really plow into whatever's necessary in order to clear the path to get the occupants of the Cuda to safety. Of course, you can also see the bumper has a winch on it. At the end of the day, this is still a 70 series Land Cruiser, so even though it's a lot heavier and its purpose has changed a little, it's still pretty capable off-road. And if you get stuck off-roading, or if someone else does, you can use the winch to get free. And since I'm up front, another interesting little piece of armoring on the outside of the Cuda, you can see the lights are covered in this little almost mesh-looking pattern. Of course, this is actually like armored metal, but it almost looks mesh-like. Now, if you're in the off-roading world, you know what this is. It looks like a brush guard, so if you're driving through forest or trees, whatever, some branch won't come and penetrate this area and smash your light and you have to replace it. That would be annoying. But then you look around to the back side of the Cuda, and you'll notice there are also brush guards on the taillights, which doesn't really make any sense. No branch is ever going to come from behind while you're off-roading and smash out your taillights, so why do they have them back there? That's because these aren't really brush guards at all. Yes, they can be used for that purpose, but they're really intended for use in like a riot situation. You have riot police inside, stuff's getting thrown at the vehicle. These will make sure that the lights aren't penetrated, so you don't have a costly repair. These things keep the headlights from getting hit with flying debris. And speaking of lighting, you will notice as you look around the cuda that you have these little LED lights mounted pretty much everywhere, front, rear, sides. And when you turn them all on, you will see that they flash in red and blue lighting configuration. That's because this cuda, it's sort of a display model set up for theoretical law enforcement department use. So the blue and red lights are obviously for law enforcement purposes. If you get a civilian version of this vehicle, these light colors could change. You can set them up in like yellow and white, or you can have them flash in basically any colors that you want. Alpine Armoring can do that. But for law enforcement purposes, you'd have these flashing lights in red and blue, as you can see. And next up, still on the subject of lights, take a look at these lights mounted on the roof. They are absolutely massive. You can see them sitting up there. Those don't flash in red or blue. Instead, they're just there to help you see. There's a cover on them right now, but you pull the cover off, you can light them up on the inside, which I'll show you in a little while, and they are very bright, and then you can see what's in front of you, which could of course be useful if your cuda is being ambushed at night and you need to see your attacker. And next up, still in terms of lighting, another interesting lighting item around back in the cuda. You can see several different lights back here. On the top you have two LED lights. Those are the red and blue strobe lights like I was showing you before. But positioned lower on the sides, you have another pair of LED lights. These are just really bright. They are intended to be blinding. In case someone is trying to tail you or follow you, you turn these things on and they really blind somebody and make it more difficult for them to do that. Alternatively, you can also use these lights to just simply help you back up. Since this vehicle is so huge, visibility can be a little bit tricky, and so turning these on, you can see a little bit better behind you. But that's the theory with these lights in back. And next up, another cool item on this truck. I like the fact that everything about this vehicle is just more heavy duty than a regular car. One good example of that out here is the hinges for the doors. You can see very heavy duty, massive exposed hinges designed to be incredibly difficult to penetrate or break with any sort of ammunition. You can see these hinges in several different places. You have similar hinges on the hood right here at the base of the windshield, and these look pretty cool in addition to being very heavy duty. And you even have these heavy duty hinges on the fuel door to insert fuel, because I guess you don't really want that to be penetrated either, and it's just kind of a cool look that ties it into the rest of the vehicle. And speaking of heavy duty stuff, how about this mirror? This is not a standard 70s